In a silent corner of the galaxy, far beyond the maps of any modern star empire, a strange signal echoed through the emptiness of space. It was weak, broken, and old, very old, but there was something unusual about it. The language was human, but not any language currently used on Earth. It was older than anyone alive, almost forgotten. For thousands of years, this signal had repeated the same words, over and over, like a cry lost in time. No one had heard it. No one had noticed. Until now. On Earth, deep beneath the surface in a quiet space agency monitoring center, alarms lit up. A technician, half asleep at his post, jolted upright. "We've got something," he said, calling his superior. The signal was coming from the edge of a dead star system, where no life was known to exist. And yet, the signal was clearly human. It shouldn't have been possible. Earth had never sent anyone that far, and there were no records of any ships lost in that part of the galaxy. Still, the signal was real. And what was even more strange, it was asking for help. The world's top scientists and military officials met in secret. The signal's code was decoded line by line. What they found sent chills down their spines. The message was short, simple, and haunting. "This is Colony Theta. We are the forgotten. If you receive this, it means we are still alive. Please, come back." The name Colony Theta rang no bells in any database. There was no record of it. It was like a ghost from humanity's ancient past. After days of debate, Earth made a decision. A special mission would be launched to follow the signal and uncover its origin. The crew of the spaceship Odyssey was chosen with great care. Scientists, engineers, soldiers, and one historian were among them. Commander Ariadne, a decorated officer with years of space experience, was placed in charge. She wasn't the kind to believe in ghosts or myths, but she understood one thing clearly: this mission could change everything. As the Odyssey left Earth's orbit, millions watched silently. No one knew what to expect. They were flying toward the unknown, chasing a message from the past that shouldn't even exist. It took weeks of travel through deep space. As the ship moved closer to the source of the signal, strange things started happening. The navigation system began to glitch. The stars outside the windows looked wrong. Some crew members started having strange dreams. One pilot reported hearing a voice whispering coordinates in his sleep. When he woke up, he realized those coordinates matched the signal's location exactly. Commander Aria didn't believe in ghosts, but the tension on board was growing. The historian, Dr. Elias Merrick, became more and more fascinated. He believed that the signal came from one of humanity's earliest space colonization missions, projects that had been canceled or erased from history after a massive war on Earth, thousands of years ago. What if some of them made it? He said quietly one evening. What if they were left behind? No one wanted to think about that. The idea that Earth had once sent people to the stars and forgotten them was horrifying. But now, the truth was floating out there, waiting to be found. After 6 weeks in space, the Odyssey finally reached the dead star system. The sun was dark, collapsed into a burnt-out husk. No planets were visible at first, only debris and broken metal. It looked like there had once been a massive battle. Suddenly, the signal grew stronger. The crew tracked it to a nearby planet, small, dry, and lifeless on the surface. But something was buried beneath. A structure, a facility, perhaps a city. The Odyssey landed carefully, its engines stirring ancient dust that hadn't moved in centuries. As the crew stepped out, the silence was heavy. Nothing moved. No wind, no sounds, only the slow beep of their scanners. But the signal was still there. Louder now. Clearer. "We are the forgotten. If you hear us, please help." They followed the signal to a mountain of broken steel. It looked like part of a massive space station had crashed here long ago. Beneath it, a metal door, still intact, somehow still powered. The crew worked together to open it. With a hiss, the door unlocked, revealing a dark tunnel. Lights flickered to life as they stepped inside. The walls were covered in old human markings, strange symbols, and a flag no one recognized. Deep inside the tunnel, they'd found it. An underground colony, hidden and alive. Lights glowed faintly. Machines hummed. And then, footsteps. A group of people appeared, dressed in uniforms that looked both human and alien. Their skin was pale from generations without sunlight, their eyes wide and full of shock. One of them stepped forward, a woman with white hair and a voice full of emotion. "You came," she said. "After all this time, someone finally came." The crew was speechless. Commander Aria lowered her weapon slowly. "We received your signal," she said. "We didn't know anyone was still here." The woman smiled sadly. "We barely are. We are the descendants of Colony Theta. We were sent here before the Great Collapse. Earth forgot us. We thought no one would ever come back." They were survivors. Their ancestors had come in search of a new world, but the galaxy had turned dangerous. A war between unknown alien forces had destroyed nearby systems. Their communication systems were lost. For thousands of years, they hid underground, sending the signal in a loop, hoping someone, anyone, would hear it. But they weren't alone. The woman's smile faded. "You shouldn't have come here," she said, her voice dropping. "Because now, they'll know you're here." Commander Aria frowned. "Who?" The woman turned toward a dark tunnel behind her. "The ones who made us hide. The ones who destroyed the stars. We call them the Watchers." Before Aria could ask more, the colony's warning alarms lit up. Red lights flashed, and a deep, pulsing sound echoed through the walls. "They've detected you," the woman whispered. "They're coming back." The Odyssey crew rushed to prepare for a fight. But nothing could have prepared them for what they saw when they looked up at the sky. Massive, silent ships had entered the planet's orbit. They didn't broadcast any signal. They didn't respond to hails. They just hovered there, watching. Back on Earth, Mission Control lost contact with the Odyssey. The last transmission they received was broken, full of static. But one line came through clearly. A voice, full of fear. "They're real. The Watchers are real." And then, silence. The distress signal had been answered. But what it awakened was something far more dangerous. Something that would shake the entire galaxy. The air inside the Odyssey was thick with tension. Commander Aria Dane stood at the ship's control center, watching the flickering screens. The massive ships in orbit had made no move, no weapons fired, no commands issued. They simply watched. It was as if the Watchers had been waiting for this moment, for the return of the humans. The crew, still in disbelief, stood frozen. The woman from the colony, whose name was Lazara, moved swiftly to the communications panel, her face pale. "They don't talk," she said, voice trembling. "They never have. They just observe, and when they decide it's time, they wipe us out." Aria's mind raced. How had Earth's history forgotten about these Watchers? These ancient enemies. The signal, the one that had brought them here, was a cry for help, but now it felt like a death sentence. She turned to her team, a mix of engineers, soldiers, and scientists, each one equally on edge. "Prepare for contact," she ordered. "We need answers, and we need to move fast before they make their first move." The plan was simple. They would try to establish communications. Lissara insisted that no one had been able to communicate with the Watchers for thousands of years, but Aria wasn't willing to give up without trying. Maybe, just maybe, the Watchers could be reasoned with. After all, this wasn't just about survival. It was about saving the descendants of a lost colony. The Odyssey's communication system was linked to the colony's ancient technology, a combination of old Earth tech and whatever had survived from the Watchers' reign. After hours of work, the crew managed to send a signal, a simple message, nothing more than, "We are human. We are here to make peace." The seconds felt like hours as they waited for a response. And then it came. Not through the ship's communication system, but directly into their minds. The crew gasped as their heads were filled with a strange alien voice. It wasn't like anything they had ever heard before, an odd hum, layered with vibrations that felt almost like a presence. They couldn't understand the words, but they could feel the power, the intent behind it. It was as if the Watchers were speaking to them without using language at all. Lizora's eyes widened with recognition. They're speaking to us in the ancient way, telepathically. Before anyone could react, the voice spoke again, this time clearer. Why did you come back? You should not have returned. The voice echoed through their minds, chilling them all to the bone. Arya didn't hesitate. We came because of the signal. We came to help. We didn't know about the Watchers. The reply came instantly, as if the Watchers already knew everything. The signal was not for you. It was a warning to those who would dare disturb the peace. What peace? Arya demanded, but the voice fell silent. The Watchers had stopped communicating, leaving only an eerie hum. Get ready, Arya said, her voice calm, but her heart pounding. We don't know what they'll do next. They've been waiting for us, and now they know we're here. The crew moved to battle stations. Despite their fear, they knew they had no choice. They had to defend the colony. They had to survive. Meanwhile, Lizara led Arya and a small team deeper into the underground facility. As they walked through the narrow corridors, she shared what little she knew about the Watchers. The colony's history was vague, but she had heard enough to understand the threat. They were created by an ancient race to control the galaxy, Lizara explained. When the galaxy fell into chaos, the Watchers were tasked with restoring order. But their idea of order was brutal. Erase any species that didn't conform, any civilization that didn't follow their rules. They wiped out entire star systems, leaving nothing but ashes behind. The deeper they went, the more Arya understood the gravity of the situation. The colony had never stood a chance, but now humanity had arrived. Would they be able to escape the same fate? Back at the Odyssey, the situation was deteriorating rapidly. The Watcher ships didn't move, but their presence was suffocating. The crew worked tirelessly, trying to figure out their next steps. They needed to get the colony to safety, but escaping was easier said than done. The Watchers had control over the system. They could track every movement. Suddenly, the ground shook, and the ship's alarms blared. They're moving, shouted one of the engineers. The Watchers are launching something. They're preparing for an assault. Arya rushed to the cockpit, where the view of space was now filled with massive energy beams. The Watchers' ships began to glow with an ominous light. The pulse of their weapons was steady, rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. But it wasn't just any attack. It was a signal that they were about to engage in a long-forgotten war. Brace for impact, Arya shouted, as the Odyssey's shields flickered and crackled under the pressure of the incoming attack. Outside the ship, an enormous force of energy erupted. The Watchers' ships released a coordinated blast. The blast was so powerful it shook the very foundations of the Odyssey. The ship's hull creaked as if it might break apart at any moment. Inside the colony, chaos erupted. The ancient facility's lights flickered wildly, and the sound of distant explosions filled the air. Lizara and Arya raced back to the colony's control room, but it was too late. The Watchers had already begun their assault. We need to get out of here, Lizara said urgently. The Watchers are not going to stop. They've already decided our fate. Arya shook her head. No, we fight. We'll fight until the last. She turned to her crew, rallying them for the battle ahead. The fate of the colony, and humanity itself, now rested in their hands. They had no idea how they could defeat the Watchers, but they would try. The battle was fierce. The Odyssey's crew used every weapon, every strategy they had learned in their training. They fought with everything they had, but the Watchers' power was overwhelming. The ancient alien machines seemed to know everything before they did. Every move, every attack, every countermeasure was predicted with terrifying precision. But as the hours passed, the crew began to realize something. The Watchers were not invincible. They were ancient, and their technology, while advanced, was not without flaws. A small group of engineers on the ship discovered a weakness, a gap in the Watchers' communication network. If they could exploit it, they might be able to disrupt the Watchers' command system, throwing their fleet into disarray. It was a long shot, but it was the only chance they had. With time running out, Aria made a bold decision. She would lead a small team to infiltrate the Watchers' flagship. If they could disable the ship's central node, they might have a chance at surviving. As Aria prepared for the mission, Lizara looked at her, her face a mix of hope and fear. "You have no idea what you're dealing with, Commander. The Watchers. They will never let you win." Aria met her gaze. "We don't have a choice. We have to try." And with that, the crew of the Odyssey prepared for the most dangerous mission of their lives. The war for humanity's survival was just beginning. The situation inside the Odyssey was becoming increasingly dire. Commander Aria Dane had barely finished rallying her crew when the ship was rocked by another wave of attacks. The Watchers' energy blasts tore through the atmosphere, shaking the Odyssey and causing alarms to blare throughout the ship. The crew scrambled, trying to stabilize the ship, but it was clear they were outmatched. The Watchers' ships were far superior in every way. As the battle raged on, Aria knew that they couldn't keep defending indefinitely. The Watchers had superior firepower, advanced technology, and an eerie knowledge of every move they made. They had been watching humanity for far longer than they had realized, and now it was clear that their presence in this corner of the galaxy had not gone unnoticed. The Odyssey's shields were rapidly failing under the barrage of fire from the Watcher ships. With each hit, the ship's structure groaned, the lights flickering with every impact. Aria stood at the helm, trying to coordinate a defense, but there was no real strategy that could beat the Watchers' overwhelming power. The battle was a one-sided slaughter, and it was only a matter of time before the Odyssey would be reduced to space debris. Lizara, who had been watching the battle unfold from the colony's control room, rushed to Aria's side. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with fear. "You have to listen to me," she urged, voice shaking. "You need to leave. If you stay here, they will destroy you. They are not here to negotiate. They are here to end us." Aria's jaw tightened. "We're not running. We came here to help, and we're going to see this through. We need to fight back." Lizara hesitated, then nodded slowly, as if coming to a difficult realization. "There's a way to fight them. But it's dangerous. It's something the ancient colony never tried because it could backfire horribly. But it's our only chance." "What is it?" Aria asked, her eyes narrowed. Lizara led Aria through the corridors of the colony's underground facility. As they walked, she spoke quickly, her words full of urgency. "In the deepest part of the colony, there's an old device. It's a weapon created to disrupt the Watcher ships. We don't know exactly how it works, but it was left behind by the original colony leaders. They used it in the past to repel a smaller force of Watchers, but it wasn't ever fully activated. The technology was too unstable. The only problem is, it's not fully understood, and there's no guarantee it will work. In fact, it might make things worse." Aria's mind raced. This was it. This was the last hope they had. They had no other options left. If they didn't act now, the Watchers would wipe them out, just as they had done with countless other civilizations. "Where is it?" she demanded. Lizara stopped in front of a large, sealed door. The metal was covered in dust, but there was something different about this door. It was ancient, yet the structure seemed strong, untouched by time. Lizara punched in a code, and the door creaked open, revealing a chamber filled with complex machinery. Some of the technology was familiar, but much of it was alien, an eerie mixture of organic and mechanical parts. In the center of the room stood a device, a large structure covered in strange symbols and glowing faintly. The air in the room was thick with an unsettling energy. Arya could feel it. The device was ancient, yet it hummed with a power that seemed to pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat. Lizara explained, "This is what we call the Shatter Core. It was designed to disrupt the Watcher's ships on a massive scale. If it works, it could send out a pulse strong enough to disable their fleet. But at a great cost. It could drain the colony's power, or worse, cause a chain reaction that could tear this entire system apart. But it's the only chance we have." Arya didn't hesitate. "We'll take the risk. Prepare the device." Lizara nodded and moved to a console beside the device. Her fingers flew over the controls, but there was a look of uncertainty in her eyes. As she activated the core, the chamber hummed louder, the machinery inside shaking as though it were coming to life. For a moment, the air seemed to vibrate with raw energy. Arya could feel the pressure building. Suddenly, the console flared with warnings. "This is it," Lizara said, voice tight. "Once the core is activated, there's no turning back. We have to make sure it reaches full power, or we won't get a second chance." Arya quickly left Lizara to finish the setup and rushed back to the Odyssey. The crew was fighting desperately to hold their ground. The Watcher's ships continued to fire relentlessly, each blast taking out another section of the ship's defenses. "Status report," Arya shouted over the comms. "We're holding on, Commander, but not for long. Shields are almost gone, and we've lost 2 of the forward cannons." The engineer's voice crackled through the comms, filled with panic. "We're activating the Shatter Core. Get ready to fire everything we have," Arya ordered. She turned to her crew. "We're going to hit them with everything we've got. Once that core is ready, we won't be able to do anything else. This is our last stand." The crew nodded, steeling themselves for what was coming. There was no room for doubt. There was no more time for hesitation. As the final pieces of the Shatter Core were put in place, Lizara's voice echoed through the comms. "It's ready. Fire when you're ready." Arya stood tall at the control panel, staring out at the Watcher's fleet. The ships hung in the vastness of space like dark, menacing shadows, ready to strike. With one last breath, Arya gave the order. "Fire." A brilliant beam of energy shot from the Odyssey, crackling through space and slamming into the core of the Watcher fleet. The impact was like a shockwave, a pulse of energy that tore through the Watcher's ships, stunning them for a moment. For the first time, the Watchers seemed confused. Their ships wavered, their movements erratic. But it wasn't over yet. The Shatter Core was working, but it was unstable. Arya could feel the strain on the Odyssey as the pulse continued to ripple outward, shaking the very fabric of space. The Watcher's ships had been momentarily disabled, but they were not finished. "Commander," the engineer shouted, "the core is going critical. We need to disengage." But it was too late. The Shatter Core was unstable, dangerously so. The energy wave it had unleashed was too powerful to control. The system was about to collapse. Arya looked at the chaos unfolding around them. The Watchers were regaining control, but the Odyssey was too damaged to fight back. Their only hope now was to escape before the core's destruction consumed everything. "Get us out of here," Arya shouted. "Now." But the Watcher's ships were closing in again, and this time they weren't retreating. The war for humanity's survival had just begun, and Arya knew the stakes had never been higher. The galaxy's fate now rested in the hands of a few desperate survivors. The Watchers would stop at nothing to wipe them out, but humanity would fight back, no matter the cost. The tension aboard the Odyssey reached its peak. The crew had done the unthinkable. They had struck a blow against the Watchers, but the aftermath was chaotic. The Shatter Core, though it had temporarily disabled the Watcher's fleet, had also caused severe damage to the Odyssey. The ship groaned under the strain, its systems flickering in and out of operation. With the energy wave still reverberating through the galaxy, the Watchers were regrouping, recalibrating their forces, and the Odyssey was in no condition to fend them off. Aria stood at the helm, her hands gripping the controls, her mind running 1,000 calculations. The Watcher's ships were regaining control faster than anyone had anticipated. The pulse from the shatter core had created a brief window of opportunity, but it was closing rapidly. If they didn't leave now, they would be trapped, and humanity's hope for survival would vanish into the cold void of space. "Commander, we've lost full power in 2 of the engines," the chief engineer shouted from the back. "If we don't make it to a nearby system, we'll be sitting ducks." Aria's eyes narrowed. The Watchers were closing in, their ships still looming ominously in the distance, as if waiting for the final act. She could feel the ships trembling from the damage, but she refused to let panic set in. The Odyssey might be damaged, but it wasn't defeated. "Helm, plot a course to the nearest system. Get us out of here." The crew scrambled, pushing the damaged ship as far as it could go. The Watcher's ships had stopped firing. An unsettling calm settled over the battlefield. But Aria knew better than to think it was over. The Watchers had just been stunned. They would strike back with brutal precision, and the Odyssey wasn't equipped to deal with another wave. "Course set, Commander," the navigator reported, his voice tense. "But the energy signature from the Watcher's flagship is increasing. They're preparing for another attack. Hold them off as long as you can," Aria said, her voice steady but filled with urgency. "We need that jump drive ready." The crew worked tirelessly, fighting to keep the ship intact while simultaneously preparing to escape. But it felt like a losing battle. The damage was too severe, and the odds of survival were rapidly diminishing. Aria glanced at Lizara, who had come to stand beside her. "They're coming back," Lizara said softly, her voice carrying a weight of grim understanding. "They'll hit us with everything they've got. The Watchers, they don't stop. They never have." Aria didn't have the time or the heart to argue. The Watchers had already shown their ruthless nature. There was no negotiation, no second chances, but Aria wasn't one to back down. Humanity had come too far, survived too much, to give up now. Suddenly, the warning alarms blared again. This time, it wasn't the energy readings that caused concern. The Odyssey's sensors had picked up something far worse, something the crew hadn't anticipated. "What the hell is that?" the communications officer asked, staring at the screen in disbelief. Aria turned to look at the monitor. Her heart dropped as she saw what the sensors were picking up, a massive fleet, far larger than anything the Watchers had shown so far. It wasn't just a few ships anymore. The Watchers had called for reinforcements. "We're outnumbered," Aria said, her voice a low growl. "We don't stand a chance against a fleet that size." Lizara stepped forward, her face filled with determination. "There's one other option," she said. "It's risky, but it's the only thing that could work. I've been studying the Watchers' technology for years. I know what they fear. It's something they've always avoided. An old weapon, hidden deep within their network." Aria turned sharply to her. "What weapon?" "The Watchers have a vulnerability," Lizara said. "A flaw in their communication network. If we can infiltrate it, we can send a counter-signal, a message that could disrupt their entire fleet. It would destabilize their command structure, make them turn on each other." The crew fell silent, absorbing the gravity of Lizara's words. "If we do this," Aria said slowly, "there's no going back. The Watchers will know we found a way to hurt them. They'll stop at nothing to destroy us." "I know," Lizara replied. "But this is our only chance. If we don't act now, the Watchers will wipe us out. All of us. Forever." Aria considered the situation, her mind racing through the possibilities. It was a long shot, an incredibly dangerous one. But if they didn't take it, they would die without a fight. The crew's lives, humanity's future, all rested on one desperate gamble. She turned to her team, determination flashing in her eyes. "Prepare for the mission. We're going to infiltrate the Watcher's flagship and send the signal. The crew nodded, preparing for what was to come. The plan was risky, and the odds of survival were slim. But it was the only option left. Inside the Watcher's flagship, things were moving quickly. The Watchers had been caught off guard by the initial attack from the Odyssey, but they were not a race to be underestimated. Their ships had been damaged, but the Watchers had more than enough firepower to finish what they had started. Their commanders were already preparing for the final assault. Inside the central command room, a figure cloaked in shadow moved between the rows of alien technology. The Watchers never allowed anyone to see their leaders, but they could always be felt, a dark presence, watching, calculating, planning. The Watchers had feared this moment. They had known that humanity's return to the stars was inevitable, but they had underestimated the tenacity of humans. The signal they had sent out, a warning that had gone unnoticed for so long, had now led to this confrontation. The Watchers had prepared for many threats over the millennia, but never had they encountered an enemy quite like humanity. The figure in the command room moved to a central console, where a series of screens flickered with images of the Odyssey and the colony. The Watchers had taken the bait. They had underestimated how quickly humanity would retaliate. Their ships were already gathering, ready to finish what they had started. But there was one thing the Watchers hadn't accounted for. The humans were adaptable, and they had found a way to strike back. Back on the Odyssey, Commander Ariadne and Lazara were preparing to board the Watchers' flagship. The ship was their only chance to send the counter-signal that could disrupt the Watchers' fleet. They would be entering enemy territory, with no guarantee of survival. Every step they took would bring them closer to the heart of the Watchers' power. Aria stood at the airlock, looking at her crew one last time. "This is it," she said. "We either succeed or we die trying. But if we don't do this, we lose everything." The crew nodded, their resolve hardening. They were all willing to make the ultimate sacrifice. For humanity's future, they would fight to the end. As Aria and Lazara entered the airlock, the crew's eyes followed them. The Odyssey's crew had been through countless battles, but none like this. They were about to face the Watchers, an ancient and powerful race that had nearly wiped out humanity once before. But now, humanity was stronger than ever, and the fight for survival would come down to a single desperate mission. With a final glance at the crew, Aria gave the order. "Open the airlock. Let's finish this." The battle for humanity's future was about to reach its climax. Would they succeed in taking down the Watchers, or would they fall, like so many others, to the cold, uncaring forces of the galaxy? The fate of the galaxy, and of humanity, rested on their shoulders, and there was no turning back. The air inside the Watchers' flagship was thick with tension. Aria and Lazara had successfully infiltrated the enemy vessel, slipping through the corridors with calculated precision. The Watchers, for all their advanced technology, had underestimated human ingenuity. The pair moved like shadows through the massive, dark halls of the alien ship, evading patrols and bypassing security systems that had been designed to keep out anyone, even a crew as resourceful as the humans aboard the Odyssey. Every step they took brought them closer to the heart of the Watchers' command network, where the signal disruptor they needed to activate lay hidden. Aria's pulse was steady, her mind clear despite the overwhelming odds. Every part of her had been trained for this moment. She had to succeed. For her crew. For humanity. Lazara's pace was just as measured. The colony scientist was leading the way now, her expertise in alien technology proving invaluable. Despite her nerves, Lazara's face was set in determination. She understood the stakes more than anyone. Humanity's survival hinged on this mission. But even she couldn't deny that the odds were stacked against them. The Watcher's ship was an ancient living fortress, brimming with hostile forces. "You know, we might actually make it out of here alive," Lazara whispered, a wry smile crossing her face, though it barely touched her eyes. Aria shot her a look. "Don't jinx it." Lazara's smile faded, her expression turning grim once again. "Right. I didn't think we'd make it this far. This is insane. They've had millennia to perfect their technology. We're breaking into the heart of their empire. And we're not even sure we can disable their fleet. We're humans, Arya said, her voice low but filled with fire. That's what we do. We fight. And we survive. Lizara nodded, her resolve hardening. They rounded another corner, and in front of them stood the control room they'd been searching for, a large circular chamber at the heart of the ship where the Watchers commanded their fleet and communicated with the other ships in their vast empire. Without a word, Arya motioned for Lizara to follow her. The two women approached the door, where a silent security system scanned the area. Lizara, with practiced precision, hacked into the terminal beside the door, bypassing the Watchers' security measures. The door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a room filled with alien technology, monitors, consoles, and strange artifacts that hummed with an eerie glow. At the center of the room was the console that could disable the Watchers' fleet. The signal disruptor. It pulsed with raw energy, waiting for someone to activate it. But Arya knew that in the wrong hands, it could cause catastrophic damage. They had to use it carefully. One wrong move, and not only would the Odyssey and the crew be lost, but the entire galaxy might descend into chaos. This is it, Lizara said, breathless as she approached the console. I can access the network from here. We'll need to send the signal directly into their fleet's command hub. Arya watched as Lizara's fingers flew across the alien interface, the screen flickering as she decrypted the Watchers' communication codes. The tension in the room was suffocating. The ship's alert systems were beginning to blare, indicating that the Watchers were aware of the intrusion. They didn't have much time. I've got it, Lizara exclaimed, her voice filled with excitement. Now we just need to trigger the pulse. It's going to be messy, but it should scramble their fleet's command systems. If we do this right, they'll turn on each other. We just have to hope the damage is enough to stop them. Arya's eyes narrowed as she looked at the console. The mission had been full of uncertainties, but this was the point of no return. If they activated the disruptor, there was no telling how it would affect the rest of the galaxy, or if they would even be able to escape alive. Before Arya could respond, a voice echoed over the intercom, chilling and emotionless. Unauthorized access detected. Intruders in Sector 9. All units prepare for termination. The cold, alien words rang through the chamber like a death sentence. Arya knew that they were now officially marked for elimination. The Watchers would stop at nothing to protect their control over the galaxy, and they had already lost their patience. The moment the message ended, a loud, metallic clanking filled the room as robotic soldiers, sleek, towering figures, emerged from hidden compartments in the walls. Lizara's hands flew across the console again, but the enemy soldiers were already closing in. We need to act fast. The pulse is ready to be fired, but I can't hold them off much longer. Arya didn't hesitate. She drew her sidearm, the familiar weight comforting in her grip. Get ready to trigger it, Lizara. I'll cover you. With practiced efficiency, Arya took aim at the first of the robotic soldiers, her shots precise. Each blast sent the machine crumpling to the floor, sparks flying from its circuits. But they kept coming, relentlessly. The Odyssey's crew had trained for moments like this, but the Watchers' forces were like nothing they had ever encountered before. There was no telling how many of these machines were hidden within the ship. Arya, Lizara shouted, panic creeping into her voice. I need a clear shot. I can't do this while I'm dodging fire. Arya's eyes darted toward Lizara, and she saw it. Lizara was nearly surrounded. The disruptor pulse was ready, but without activation, it was useless. Arya knew what had to be done. She dashed toward Lizara, firing at the advancing soldiers as she went. Her shots were precise, but the machines were closing in faster than she anticipated. Her heart raced as she reached Lizara, who had finally managed to access the final code on the console. Do it, Arya barked, stepping in front of her to provide cover. Now. Lizara hesitated for just a split second, then slammed her hand down on the final key. A high-pitched hum filled the air as the signal disruptor came to life, sending a wave of energy rippling through the ship. The lights flickered violently, and the machines around them froze in place, their systems scrambling as the disruptor's signal reached its peak. The Watcher's ships, once a well-organized and deadly fleet, began to splinter. Arya watched with grim satisfaction as the fleet's coordination faltered. Ships veered off course, colliding with each other in an uncontrolled frenzy. The enemy was in chaos. The Pulse had done its job. But just as they thought they had won, the flagship's central core began to overheat, its systems spiraling out of control. The ship was on the brink of total collapse, and Arya knew they had mere minutes to escape before the entire vessel exploded. "Lizara, we've got to go, now," Arya shouted, grabbing the scientist's arm and pulling her toward the exit. The two women sprinted through the halls, the alarms now blaring in full force. They could hear the roar of destruction as the Watcher's fleet disintegrated in the distance. The Odyssey was their only hope for survival. The countdown had begun. They raced back toward the hangar, the sound of their footsteps echoing in the empty halls. Every moment felt like an eternity. Arya's mind raced with a single thought: get back to the ship. The fate of humanity was now in their hands. Finally, they reached the hangar bay. The Odyssey loomed large in front of them, its hull scarred and battered from the earlier battles. But it was still functional, still their only way out. The airlock opened with a hiss, and they bolted inside, collapsing into their seats. The crew had already begun the evacuation sequence, preparing to jump into the safety of a nearby system. "Do it," Arya said, her voice rough with exhaustion but filled with relief. The pilot's hands moved over the controls with practiced speed, and the Odyssey lurched into motion. The jump drive powered up, and in an instant, the ship shot into hyperspace, leaving the burning remains of the Watcher's flagship behind. Arya sank back in her seat, finally allowing herself to breathe. They had done it. The signal had been sent, the Watchers had been crippled, and humanity had survived to fight another day. But Arya knew the war wasn't over. This was only the beginning. The Watchers would regroup. They would come back stronger, and humanity would be ready. For now, though, the crew of the Odyssey could take a brief moment of peace. They had won, and for that, they had earned it. The war was far from over, but for the first time, humanity had a fighting chance.